people hyper-optimizing have gone in isolation.
If everyone says they've got the secret sauce that works.
Dr. Stephen Muskal was working on neural networks before AI became the world's favorite buzzword. More than 40 years at the intersection of AI, chemistry, biology, and drug discovery. Now, what makes Steve fascinating is not just the science, but how he's turned his life into a living lab.
Our bodies are so phenomenal. We just have to get out of our own way and just let self-healing take place.
Is the most underrated, not talked about protocol.
But one day, the rest of the world will come to this concept of medicine.
What are the craziest experiments you've run? Hey, Traction fam, super excited to interview my good friend, Dr. Stephen Muskal. Dr. Stephen Muskal was working on neural networks before AI became the world's favorite buzzword. And he spent more than 40 years at the intersection of AI, chemistry, biology, and drug discovery. He has a PhD in biophysical chemistry from UC Berkeley, built early neural networks for protein structure prediction, and has been the founder of two companies, Certainty and Hydrogen Certainty, an AI-powered drug discovery platform. And on the side, he's always tinkering with some cool things. He's built AI Steve, a personal AI system that acts as a memory layer, research assistant, and cognitive mirror. I think you uploaded today's content into AI Steve, right? We'll get right into it.
Yeah.
And he built AI Dad, a system designed to preserve his dad's legal expertise, family wisdom, and reasoning. His dad was a very well-known lawyer. And quite recently, he's released Food Health on the App Store, and that's a way to scan and score what you eat and turn your meals into structured nutritional data for improving your health. Now, what makes Steve fascinating is not just the science, but how he's turned his life into a living lab. Music, community, exercise, nutrition, mindset, sleep, recovery, all become inputs into one human performance system. And he believes that the next frontier of health is not a protocol. It's a personal experiment run daily with data as the scoreboard. So we're going to dive into everything: AI, drug discovery, metabolic health, data, and the future of human performance. Steve, thanks for doing this, man. It's been a while.
Yeah, thank you. In fact, I reflect back, and you and I do a friends and family podcast thing. And when I had you on, boy, you spiked my readership. It went through the roof. So
I hope so.
Yeah, you said, hey, let's do a pod. I'm like, yeah, let's do a pod. But no, it's great. And every time I talk with you, my energy levels just shoot through the ceiling.
I love it, man. Thank you so much. I need some of that. I need the energy spike today. But you were working on neural networks decades before AI became a thing, before it became mainstream. What pulled you into the intersection of chemistry, biology, and machine learning?
Yeah, great question. I'm a highly mathematical guy, right? I was kind of head in math in my early life, but I'm not the kind of guy who likes to try to fit formulas to everything because there's so much we can't explain. And actually, as undergrad, I had a research project in the area of memory, but the biology of memory. And I started to study the brain a bit. And I was just fascinated by how capable the brain is to fit patterns and how it can be predictive, often not understanding why. I think understand why it evolves towards effectiveness, right, and fitness. And when I came across the biological neural networks, I went, wow. And then I came across the modeling of these networks, computational. And when I saw what these were capable of doing, I said, okay, great. I now have this tool that we can leverage in a huge number of areas, and sort of the rest is history.
That is fantastic.
It's pretty amazing. Our brains are phenomenally powerful, and neural networks are just sort of a mini manifestation of that. But you can see today what AI is and what it's become. And it's large part because of all these neural networks integrated together.
So neural networks for protein structure prediction, for a non-scientific founder or anyone who's from a non-science background, why was that such a hard and important problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. So looking back, proteins are made out of 20 common amino acids, just building blocks, very simple, different shapes. And proteins fold and form this intricate puzzle of these shapes together. But you see, again, nature, it stores information in DNA, which is really a linear sequence. And it goes from DNA to, yes, protein and structure, but it's ultimately outcome, right? So this information string is what nature works with. And then how that organism survives is the output, right? And so it always just plexed me that why was this so challenging? If nature could take 20 common amino acids and order them up, and then suddenly this great result happens, why can't we just use some of these tools that can basically read strings and make predictions? And I came across this paper. It was a wonderful paper. It's called Net Talk that learned how to read aloud. This will blow you away because you think about this, like text to speech is big. It's common today. But there was this fellow by the name of Terry Sejnowski that might have been at Johns Hopkins. He basically took a stream of text from a page of book where he said the center amino acid, the center letter, the sound was a function of what surrounded it. And he just trained it by running it through the book page. And then he was able to have it speak aloud on a brand new page of text that it never had seen before. And so when I saw that, I'm going, okay, we could use this for proteins and how it folds together. So that's kind of where I went from there. And it was a little ahead of my time in the sense we didn't have many examples to learn from. And today, well, actually a couple of years ago, the AlphaFold folks won a Nobel Prize for doing this because they had a lot more examples to work from.
That's awesome. Now, you've spent decades from there helping pharma companies discover and develop therapeutics. How has AI changed drug discovery from the old days when you started to today? And what are some cool drugs you helped discover?
Well, there are so many different projects and programs I've worked on over the years. We make small contributions, and it takes a long time before you see the results of this. So in my early career, we were working with companies that were working with the very, very first anti-cancer drugs, the very, very first antivirals, not first, but the variations of that. And technically under non-disclosure, I can't describe every project, but the reality is every one of them we worked on has had at least some contribution in one way or another. And it's ultimately just bringing together data and making predictions, but then let people at the end of the day make a decision based on that. And it's people who make this happen. But I think a key point is that it takes so long to bring a drug to market. It's often well over 10, 12 years. And most people rarely in their career see it from basically cradle to grave, from beginning to end. And they moved to different companies. But I've been running the Adigen entity for over almost 25 years now. And so we had an opportunity to see things from the very, very beginning to actually now helping people, which is pretty cool.
Any interesting ones you can talk about that are mainstream, or you're not allowed to?
Well, first of all, there's not any that I can actually say, look, if it weren't for us, it wouldn't have happened, because there's so many people involved in all these projects. But since I still run a company of going concern, I have to be careful with what we say, because here's the other point. There are a lot of projects that are failures, and there are many projects that we have identified potential serious outcomes for the drugs that they ultimately are selling, and we can't talk about that because it will be down the road. It's a liability issue, so I have to be really careful.
Totally get it. Get it. Now, peptides are all the rage, right?
Yeah.
We talked about protein structure. How does that play into maybe finding the next miracle peptide? And have you thought about that, given how hot it is, the space is right now?
Oh, yeah. It's so, first of all, I was just chatting with actually one of my pals who's a nephrologist. I was asking if he's taken the Wolverine stack. By the way, have you played with that at all?
I've tested a couple peptides, but they all have data and human trials behind them. Tesamorelin is one for visceral fat, I think, although it was FDA approved for people with HIV and visceral adiposity. But that's the one I think that has worked well for me. The others, it's funny. I think if you're hyper optimized, your body doesn't see it's a sort of chicken and egg situation, right? Peptides and all of these supplements or exogenous things work better if your body's optimized. But then if your body is hyper optimized, meaning you're eating, you're sleeping, you're eating well, you're training hard, your VO2 max is in check, it sort of also doesn't feel like a big force multiplier when you take some of these things, right? That's the other thing. It's not a miracle drug. Maybe it is. Now on the Wolverine stack, I'd love to hear your take, if you tried it.
Yeah, have not yet. I want to just sort of do a quick rewind. So right out of grad school, I started working at this company called Molecular Design. And at that time, the company doesn't exist anymore, but we used to manage all the chemical information for all the pharma companies. And I'd visit all these companies and help define requirements. It was really pretty cool. One of the things that, because I came from the protein world, and then this was more of a small molecule, things that you consume orally as opposed to things that require injections. Because I came from the protein world, I thought of things in terms of bigger proteins or smaller proteins, even smaller, what we call peptides. And I wrote up this little piece that I misused the word peptide mimicry, which in the pharmaceutical space means you try to take what's known as a peptide and make it to a small molecule, hard substance that you can consume orally. And it's easier to sell from a pharmaceutical perspective, an orally available drug. It's more stable, it's less expensive to make, they can make more money on it, greater margins. Injectables are much more challenging. Well, we start to see that that's changing today because people, especially with like an Ozempic and some of these GLPs, that people are a little more comfortable, if you will, injecting. But if you've noticed, Novo came up with a orally available version of Ozempic, which is, to me, was like, thank you. I love seeing this because it was actually, Ozempic is a peptide, right? And is largely what you see it endogenously, meaning it's inside our human bodies anyway. But all they did is make a simple set of modifications, but it's still largely a peptide and you can consume it orally and it's effective. So that to me is like, boom, open the kimono, because all these different peptides people are exploring that require injections can, I think, at one point be slightly optimized for oral consumption, and that will be game changing. And the advantage of that is not just the less expense. One of the issues with injections that hang in your body for weeks on end, if people don't really feel good and they're nauseous, it's still there. They can't get rid of it. But if they're consuming orally, they can microdose or stop, and it basically gets eliminated fairly quickly. So I think there's some advantages to what we're seeing in the space here. And back to my early days, I like the concept of going from maybe small molecules to peptides. It'd be wonderful if we could do that, even and have them orally available.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Now, you're a big fan of N of 1 experiments. What are the craziest experiments you've run? And it could be a number of things, but tell us, what is N of 1 experiments? Because the only person I know that runs publicly a lot of N of 1 experiments is Brian Johnson.
Yeah, Brian.
So how should the public think about N of 1 experiments? What are some crazy ones you've run? How do you design them? And what does it look like?
Yeah, so some are actually X-rated, so I can't talk about those. But the ones that I can talk about, I mean, it usually takes a lot of time to collect data. So a couple like come to mind immediately. I took, and I'm big into cold plunges, and that's one of the reasons I'm still cold. And so I took one before this call. For a full year, I took a cold plunge every single day. And I took, prior to that, a DEXA scan. And then near the end, another DEXA scan. And everything else, I'm pretty much the same. Food, exercise, I do pretty much the same thing every day with respect to that. I don't like to change much of the variable space. I live in Southern California, our weather's not much different either. And so a lot of very consistent things, but the one major difference was the cold plunge. I noticed a radical reduction in visceral fat. And so that, I think, is crazy in the sense that, I mean, even, well, in Carlsbad, you don't really get cold, but yeah, the weather's not cold outside. When you see people taking cold plunges and it snows on the ground, that's nuts. But to be able to do that consistently is pretty challenging.
So all things were equal. The only thing you changed was cold plunge. Now, what's the temperature?
Yeah.
How much visceral fat are we talking about? How many months was the protocol? Like, when did you run the DEXA scan, and how many months after you noticed the change? Because the visceral fat, like, not a lot, people don't have pounds and pounds of this. If you do, then you're seriously ill, right? You got metabolic dysfunction, probably type 2 diabetes. But like, what did you start with? What did you end with? Like, was it statistically significant?
Yeah, it was very significant. So it wasn't just visceral, by the way, it's general fat. No, I got down to like elite athlete level of body fat. I actually posted this on social media. I just showed the images side by side, and they were a year apart, and it was cold plunge every single day. And I believe that there is an effect to that. I mean, I think I probably built up brown fat, which you can't easily measure with a DEXA, to my knowledge. I should say that almost every time, I almost always do at least a very hot shower before or a sauna before. I always go from hot to cold, and I do not go back to hot. Sometimes I'll do a cycle back to hot and then cold again, but always on cold. And I will do full body vibration to warm up with squats or something like that. So that's part of the protocol. I'm not one of those nuts who goes in the late 30s or early 40s on cold plunge. It's typically 51-ish and change. But because I don't have to worry about combing my hair, I put in earplugs and I go underwater like Tony Robbins with a snorkel. And another key part of the protocol is I hum. And I get my face and head wet and cold right away because I believe the face is triggered to get a lot of the metabolic activity going. And I can warm up, and it's called deep plunge. It was those guys who won Shark Tank, and I have a temperature thing in there.
That's why you look so young, because you cold immerse your face every single day, so your skin's all tight.
I don't know if I look that young, but I'm going to be 60 in a couple months. So I mean, I've never asked how old are you. Are you like?
I'm 46.
Oh, all right, yeah, yeah. Well, because you keep yourself fit, right? But yeah, the cold face, cold head, underwater breathing. I don't breathe underwater. I'm there for 5 minutes or so, and I hum, get the vagus nerve vibrating, and you warm up, and it's that. As long as you get that first right when you get in, you're good. But that's my protocol. But that was a crazy experiment in the sense that it took a long time. Now the other one, similar to this, is and back to the face point, I made a little app where I made it available to people in the App Store for free because I had to build it for myself. Exporting data out of Apple Health was a pain in the butt, so I built an app to do that. But my experiment was taking a picture of my face every single day. I'm still collecting the data on that, but I believe, your face is a window. It's a great imagery into what's going on inside. And some of the best physicians, they can look at someone and just look at their skin and their face, and it's a window to what's actually inside, right? You'll notice, people I can almost always tell if someone's got IBS by looking at their skin. My pattern recognition picks that up. But my camera on my phone is every morning I take a picture and it triggers an export, which goes in a Dropbox that my AI Steve system sucks in. So every single day I have all these selfies that are being captured, and then all the other things that my AI Steve system is bringing in. So I'm correlating face to sentiment, which is like how I'm doing each day, to, I do blood runs every few months with both Function Health and Insight Tracker. I have all that. I'm collecting the data right now, but it's going to be a year experiment to collect all this data. So I do it at a little less cost than Brian. Brian's pumping big money into that. But I'm doing a lot lower cost with iPhones and my Mac Mini.
And so the majority of what you're tracking is you're taking photographs of yourself, and from the photographs, it's one of the indicators of what? Metabolic health or just overall?
I'm correlating to a ton of things. So the first signal I started to see is that I was able to correlate face with REM sleep. The strongest correlation I'm finding is a sentiment score that my AI Steve system is driving. And sentiment it's basically, and what's my attitude for the day, right? Am I angry or happy or whatever? But it's a scoring metric that I use for that. But that seems to be strongly correlated with my face, which ultimately I think, again, sleep. You can always tell if someone's well slept, right? Or someone who's not well slept. But I think the face is, again, a good window to that. And the key is just capturing a bunch of the data and then zeroing in on, and I'm a neural network guy. In fact, I'll first use random forest technology to first identify quick correlations, and then I'll go to town with my neural networks.
But what's interesting is recently there was a paper a couple of weeks ago, I think it came out, that a 30-second scan of your eye detect heart disease, diabetes, kidney damage, early Alzheimer's before it happens. Oculomics, I guess,
Okay.
Right? They were looking at retina, and the retina scans have been available for all kinds of sort of symptoms, right? And now I think if you can pre-detect from your retina scan metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction is probably leading indicator or root cause of a lot of things, right? It all starts with like visceral fat. You eat excess calories, you eat all kinds of garbage, you smoke, you drink, and all the microplastics, endocrine disruptors that you're exposed to, and the excess just spills over into your organs, and then it manifests into these diseases over time, right? And so I think if you can tell that from a retina scan, you can tell that from a DEXA scan. You don't really have to do a retina scan to be able to tell, right? You run a body spec DEXA scan, you know how much visceral adiposity you have. You can look at that. And it's very interesting that not a lot of people look at visceral fat. A lot of people in the medical space look at visceral fat as the leading indicator of a lot of things, right? It's you feel something, you go to the physician, they prescribe you something, or they tell you what to do to fix the thing you got. But you never look at what's caused the thing. And if you look at most diseases, they're rooted in what? What's the first thing that shows up? It's visceral adiposity, right?
I see that as another indicator, just like H1AC is, how much sugar you've got going in your system, right? And what your insulin sensitivity or desensitivity is. And again, I think a lot of that, ultimately, I like to come back to things that are non-pharmaceutical to help address. And things like sleep, movement, the food you eat, those are just like the major pillars. So I'm running experiments all the time. And what I do often is there's this concept called deconvolution in drug discovery, where you have like mixtures of things and you analyze to see what the results are. And then you do enough overlapping of the mixtures. You try to identify what's the thing that caused X, Y, Z. I always do these mixture experiments. My wife always says to me, what? how do you know what's the cause? You're always changing things. Well, I
Yeah.
think our brains are quite capable of handling this deconvolution. So I'm doing a ton of these kinds of mixture things, but they often map down some basic things. And if you were a CGM, did you ever do that?
I've ran a CGM for like a couple of weeks just to see how things are spiking up and down. And I was fairly like stable because of the lifestyle I live and what I eat. Like, I mean, I eat, I go for a walk, I take most of my meetings while walking.
Yeah, I did that the other day. I remember that. Yeah, I'm on a treadmill right now. I just stopped it. So I wasn't.
You're in a walking treadmill. Yeah, I mean, the last time we caught up a couple months ago, or was it a month ago, we did it walking, right? And I think what I eat is also extremely stable. I don't introduce new things. I eat like 5 or 6 same things: lentil pasta, chicken breast, some protein, Greek yogurt, and I run that like clockwork, right? Blueberries, a lot of blueberries. I just make life really simple.
Yeah.
And the more things I add, all those textures and all of that, just spike my reward system. But I'm honestly, my dad's a retired chef, and they're over from Toronto, Canada, and he's cooking. And he looks at me and he's like, I've been here for 6 weeks. We're helping with his treatment, rehab his shoulder and everything. Started training him in the gym. And he's like, dude, you eat the same freaking thing every single day. Like, don't you get bored of it? And I'm like, well, it's the same ingredients, but yeah, like the chicken breast has a different sort of spice on it. But I don't know. I don't even think about it. And maybe I'm an anomaly, but I literally, my breakfast is Greek yogurt, oats, blueberry, and whey protein. And then I love red lentil pasta. And I think it gives me that fiber. We've gone into this whole protein maxing, right?
Yeah.
But I think fiber is so important, especially with the colon cancer, colorectal cancer age being like, that decreasing year by year. I think you got to really be taking a lot of fiber. So I try to get like 40 grams of fiber at least.
Yeah.
And red lentil pasta and blueberries have been really good for my gut. I've historically suffered from IBS as a kid. So blueberries and red lentil pasta, those two things have fixed the gut, plus Greek yogurt. So yeah, I eat the same thing. And, there's no shame in admitting that.
No, look, you eat to live as opposed to live to eat, right? But the reason I asked about the CGM is because there's a lot that you can learn from it, and you learn because you keep things stable. And that's why I come back to sleep. If I eat a big meal, actually larger number of calorie intake for me, I will spike my sugar levels, even if I'm not even eating anything like carbs. If I eat a ton of protein, I will spike my blood glucose. And I too go for a walk after meals, right? But one of the things that brings my glucose level down, sleep, a nap. So if it's up there, I take a nap, boom, it comes down. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, right? And I think a lot of times when people have interrupted sleep, there's an association, obviously, with the fact that they crave carbs the next day, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, there's no question things like sleep are just critical. I know that you've thought a lot about this as well. I think, unfortunately, a lot of people overlook it or think, I'll sleep when I'm dead kind of BS. But, one of the things, by the way, I wanted to chat with you, I'm sorry, I know you have some questions you want to chat about, but one of the things that I was reflecting on listening to a podcast yesterday, there's this gentleman who was just like off the charts, great on everything and every business venture he's been on. And I'm the kind of guy who loves listening to stuff like that. But I was realizing, you know what? There are a ton of people who get turned off by that because they're like, that's so far outside of my world. I could never do that. When you and I both talk about keeping our food the same, and we're doing all the work we're doing, don't you think that there's a big population of folks who say, I can't do that? There's no way.
I mean, I wear pretty much the same thing almost every day, right? And I eat pretty much the same thing. I just don't want cognitive overload. And it keeps things stable. Now, what I've seen when I put the CGM on is anytime I have like carbs and I eat protein with it, it didn't spike it. So like there's some level of balancing effect there. If you eat a lot of sort of fast carbs, it'll spike it, right? You eat oatmeal with like eggs, it won't spike it at that level, right? I think that is really important. The type of carb you eat, if you eat slow digesting carbs, you get like stable energy through the day. And a lot of people don't do that, right? Our breakfast is not our breakfast is mostly, as American population, it's dessert, right?
Well, so the point is it's highly concentrated, processed, is highly concentrated. And the real analogy here is with drugs, for example. Those are very highly concentrated forms of chemical substances. Nature doesn't typically do that. It balances it with matrices of fiber, fat, all these other things together.
Yeah.
Everything's kind of in moderation, and because you're affecting all these different systems. And so I totally agree. You got to balance the stuff you eat and stay away from the processed world. You just want to avoid intense concentrations of just about anything you consume. Our bodies are so phenomenal, right? We just have to get out of our own way and just let let self-healing take place. And I want to bring up a point because when you and I had that discussion, I was in my studio and I think that part I called community is the moat.
Yeah.
And, I reflect on some of the things that are most impactful for me that improve my sleep, that just make me feel good in general. Right? It's often involving other people, right? And I'm highly introverted, but just hanging with other people, the community. Music to me is a way to have community sharing, and there's motion and there's the sound vibrations and all that. But I think that community element that you've referred to so much, it gets me way up there on REM sleep than that night that follows, and way up there on deep sleep if there's motion involved. But it's the people. And they say with these longevity experts who often are quite young, it's the 92 and 105-year-old that you really want to ask about longevity, right? And almost all of them say communities, people.
Community is the most underrated, not talked about protocol, right? I think what's happened in the last little while is a lot of people hyper optimizing have gone in isolation.
Yes.
So you do this thing, you hyper optimize, you go in isolation, and then there's another thing that spikes your cortisol, right? And this is what I wanted to talk about is metrics, right? We talk about data, we talk about metrics, we got sleep trackers, we got devices that track everything. I've taken off all trackers for the last 2 months because it was causing anxiety, right? Like how much optimization goes into this hyper optimization and does the reverse? Like, you're looking at your HRV, but the anxiety of looking at your HRV trending down and your sleep trending down spikes your cortisol. So the stress of hyper optimization creates more stress, right? And so I took it off. My sleep has not been the greatest because this is like almost 20 years of being an entrepreneur in the startup land where you move really fast and you're always wired. Now, having that wearable was stressing the F out of me.
Yes.
So 2 months ago, I took it off and I'm like, listen, how am I feeling? How am I performing in the gym? How's my gut doing? Yes, sleep is really, really, really important. But if I stress about it and I sleep worse and I feel worse and my training's going down, my cognitive performance is going down, then is it worth it, right? And so I think that's one place that is important diving in is what are the key drivers of human performance? And I look at it as being 6, right? You got at the top, usually people anchor on exercise, nutrition. But I would say at the top is spirituality, right? Some connection with something that's beyond yourself. And it may be meditation, it may be gratefulness, it may be God, whatever it is. Some level of connection with oneself and a higher being, I think is important. And I'm not saying like go and pick a religion and go down that path, but I'm saying like something where you wake up with gratitude, with abundance, thinking deeply about the good in your life, praise for what you have, not what you don't have, meditation, that kind of thing. And then the second thing I put on that list is community. You can do all the optimization in the world, but the people who live the longest, healthiest lives are surrounded by people. If you're all by yourself with a 6-pack and the highest sort of the best biological markers, but you have nobody around you, eventually that will eat into you, right? Chronic stress is the biggest driver of mortality. And I think the last Surgeon General signaled that as a warning. Chronic stress is a huge driver of mortality. And I think it's equivalent to smoking a pack a day, the stress, the allostatic load that it creates over time. And so I think those two things should be at the top. And then it's like, okay, exercise. Every meta-analysis out there talks deeply about exercise, protein-rich whole foods, and then recovery is huge.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I guess one of the key points, though, it's about the recovery point. If you are a highly introverted person and being around your family stresses the crap out of you, friends, that's not going to be a good community to be hanging with, right? You want to hang with things that help recovery. One of the biggest indicators I've noticed in advance to me, identifying if I'm going to have a good night's sleep, is right when I do put on the Aura Ring, which I do put in airplane mode, and I make sure my phone's not one I can check the result of right when I wake up. But first thing I look at is what's my resting heart rate, or what's my heart rate right before I go to bed. And if it's in the like low 60s, high 50s, I'm going like, yes, I'm going to have a good night of sleep.
And that's what you want, right? You want your resting heart rate before bed to be really low. And there's ways to do that. But like, think about it this way. You get in an argument with your spouse, right? You have something that like stimulated you, overstimulated. Your resting heart rate before bed is going to be high. And then you're not going to sleep well. You're going to be wired, right?
If you eat too late, your heart rate's up up as well. I've noticed if I have like a cocktail or two, which I don't drink much, my heart rate's higher going to bed. That's like a major indicator for me. And again, I'm not obsessed. In fact, a key with getting these metrics is to not analyze the data as you're collecting it or shortly after you collect it.
It's a trend. It's a trend,
and then look at backwards at the data, because if you look at the data as you collect it, it's Heisenberg. You disrupt that which you observe, right? So you want to really not do that. And the highly measurement, it's only to kind of get framework. And once you've got that, then take them off. Take off the wearables. Get rid of the anxiety.
You want the trend. A lot of people look at data as individual points and they stress about the data. Oh, my thing needs to be. Just look at trends, right? And you want to know, are you trending generally upwards or downwards? Everyone has an off day. Everyone. Like I don't know a single person. Jeff Bezos has an off day. Elon Musk has an off day. So what do you think you're gonna have, right? The wealthiest people have a lot of off days. It's like your CGM, right? You can let the tail wag the dog, and every time it spikes, you go crazy and do something, or you can just watch the trend, and then you get to a point that the CGM is not to like it spikes, so I go and react to it, but it's to observe the trends and then modify your lifestyle so you're, with anything, whether it's your HRV, whether it's your resting heart rate before bed, whether it's your T levels or hormones or anything for that matter, right? It's to have a trend. Your glucose levels with the CGM is to have a rhythm that's flow state, right? What is flow state? We talk about I love translating business to human performance and vice versa, right? What is flow state in business? Like as an entrepreneur, your mission or your purpose in life and your skill set and your goals are all in sync, right? And so that means if you take on a challenge that is too hard, you're not going to be in flow state, right? That's too hard for your skill level. Or you take on a challenge that's too easy for your skill level, you're going to get bored. Now, if both are in balance, but the purpose doesn't align with you, you're going to check out too. You're not in flow state. So you need a few things to be in flow state. And that's the same thing with your body, right? Like one, I don't like to chase. And two, I don't like to just disrupt my flow by eating nonsense or going out of whack, right? And maybe that's just aging, because that's how my grandparents lived and they were farmers.
No, look, I see flow state, as you described, as an opportunity to resonate, and this comes to the community and the local group of people that you're with. When you are in a state of flow and other people are flowing with you, it doesn't take a big group to do this. It's synergistic. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And I come back to my music mixes that I do. As a drummer, I could be that autistic guy if I need to be, where I don't have to listen to anyone. I just play my beat. Boom, boom, boom. But if I have key musicians in there that all have a good sense of timing, we're roughly in the same groove, as they call it. If you build something that's crazy cool, and it can breathe. Sometimes it speeds up, sometimes it slows down, but you resonate together. And it's just like individual frequencies, just like individually highly concentrated substances or foods are not good by themselves. You have to have a chorus. And that's why I think ultimately when you come to the community is everything in a lot of ways. I totally agree, because it helps lock it in and everyone can get this flow working together. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're banging in the heads of each other, but when you come back into flow, I think the whole group benefits.
I think that's really important, right? And I'll give you two examples from my personal life. One, when I was at an all-time low, exited the company, made a lot of money, but I was overweight, chronically overweight. My lungs had collapsed. I was hospitalized, right, literally weeks after the exit, and I was overweight, and my body was haywire. My metrics, my biomarkers were like a 75-year-old, and I was like on the verge of tapping out. And then I fixed a lot of things and went on this health journey. Now, 3-4 years later, I went through another very stressful bout. The first time was, what they talk about is sort of high performers collapse at the top, right? So when you're grinding hard, you're running a race, you're going full steam, your adrenaline is high and your cortisol is high. So even though you're catching all kinds of illnesses, your body doesn't detect it. Now at the finish line, what happens is your adrenaline drops, much like in a startup or running a race, right? And then your cortisol drops. Now you've exited the company, you have no successor mission. So everything catches up to you. You're ruminating and like all hits you at once. And that's what happened to me. Now I made sure I wouldn't do that again. And so I started training heavy, lifting 4 or 5 times a week, cardio after working out, long walks, eating the same thing. And I got my life on track. But then a year or so ago, went through a very stressful situation and my body started to go haywire, but it didn't show show up in my appearance. And my wife, who's a physician, tells me, Lloyd, you need to get your mind in order. And we need to bring, we call it team performance. We need to bring to your performance team like a mindset coach, somebody who helps you put things in perspective. You need to surround yourself and get away from the chaos of this toxic relationship, business relationship you're in. And I made nothing of it. I'm like, oh, I can brute force through it. And she's like, Lloyd, just go and check your biomarkers. I'm like, listen, I am lifting 110-pound dumbbells for reps on an incline bench. What do you think is wrong with me? Look at me. And she's like, just take your biomarkers. I went and took my biomarkers. I ran my blood work, VO2 max, everything at tank. Basically, my mind was brute forcing through the weights, but my body was trending towards the last collapse metrics. And I freaked out because I'm like, geez, I'm seeing my visceral fat has gone up, my T levels are down. And this is the point, right? Chronic stress will outdo all your working out and nutrition. So most people don't optimize their life at that level. So if you're hyper optimized and you're chronically stressed, it'll keep you at baseline. If you're not hyper optimized and you're working out 2-3 times a day, you're doing the basics, it'll take you below baseline and then eventually it'll hit you. That's the point I want to make around people are so important. But you can have multiple podcasts on this and how to optimize your well-being through people.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have a similar story in this, not to the extent you had with the total collapse, but I've been pulling blood draws every few months for years. And I run a little hot with platelets. I run a little hot. Great indicator, by the way. Want a metric? Are you over exerting yourself? Are you constantly in the state of repair? You're going to have inflammatory markers like up a platelet situation. I also ran a little hotter on some of my lipids. I mean, my HDL is always up high and my LDL is a little elevated. I found a great correlation. If I had a great night of sleep right before a blood draw, all those numbers come down with HDL, stays up a little bit. But those are repair, body being in a constant state of repair because, like you, I mean, I was doing like multiple half triathlons for training, for a sprint triathlon. It's like, what are you doing? You just constantly beat your body up and it's constantly needing to repair itself. And that's one of the reasons for elevated cholesterol is because your body needs it to repair. LDL delivers it, cholesterol it's needed through your broken up cells, and HDL brings it back. It's nice little circular system. But if you're constantly in a state of physical and mental challenge, I think you go from, there's a spectrum, I call it hormetic challenge, which is good, that with which doesn't kill you, will make you stronger, to little t trauma, which is not so good, to big T trauma. And we often, high performers are often pushing ourselves to this high T trauma state. And much like you had in that illness, it's analogous to hypothermia. You get that once, you're going to fall into it really quickly. If you're not careful, you could now have to be very cold and you can become hypothermic because your body just falls into this state. So I think one of the things, moderation is important. How do you get people who are high performers to moderate? I think you need other people to help them dial it back a little bit, and that's why the community thing, I think, helps people bring. I bet you that if you did a study, you would see general resting heart rates come down when people are together when they're interacting in a way that they like to be. If they're not having to give a presentation or all stressed or something like that, in front of a bunch of people, but truly hanging with your buds. I bet you everyone's heart rates come down together, sort of resonate in unison. It's just my hypothesis. Oh, maybe you see the data out there, but this is my guess. So when you think about your next plays, honestly, get people working out together or just doing things together, circle discussions, give their little pitches of ideas or brainstorming. When they get together, everyone just kind of chills it down a little bit and pushes down from that little T back to more of the hermetic challenge, which is, I think, important for growth. Lastly, my biggest challenge in yoga, Shavasana. I cannot lay still. Because I want to keep moving, right? You got to chill, you got to relax. And so as I decrease the amount of time that I'm working out and the amount of time, if I would just walk nowadays, I don't even run as much anymore. Platelets came down, lipids came down, chill. I smile a lot more too.
100%. Now, you've been a scientist, founder, CEO, musician, athlete. Is there some measure of high performance that you define? What is high performance mean for you?
High performance to me, and this goes a little bit against that community point, but to me means you do not need competition in order to keep up in your game. I know folks who cannot really perform hard unless there's other parties they're competing with. Now, I wasn't an only child. I had a sister, but I was a boy, she was a girl, and we lived in a rural area. So I didn't have close friends to always play games with. So I had to throw a baseball against a brick wall or play ping pong against the ping pong wall. I played myself. And I had my own internal competition, but I didn't need the affirmation of a contest. I wanted to do improvement on my own. And I think if you look at things that way where you're just trying to self-improve, that's, I think, the best indicator of how you're going to perform ultimately. I think Michael Jordan, while is perceived as being like a highly competitive basketball player, I think he had this internal clock of internal competition that he just brought to such a high level that even when he's playing other people, they kept looking up at him. Let me ask you, when you go and hang out with people or walk into a room with even just brand new folks, are you ever intimidated, or do you ever think about how they might be thinking about you? Do you ever have that?
There was a time when I was starting out, I used to think that. I don't anymore.
Right.
Because eventually you stop caring,
Right? Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And if you care too much, so this is what I think, right? A players seek challenge.
Yeah.
Right. The best way to figure that out is you train with somebody in the gym. A players want a challenge. They'll do whatever it takes and they'll ask for more. They'll want to load more weight. They'll want to do more reps, whatever it is. They'll want to stay longer in the cold plunge. B players are performative and they just want praise. Everything is a show. And that's a way to look at it, is like, who is genuinely seeking a challenge without any personal gain, right? They're just stimulated by the challenge, versus who is performative. And then C players, they're just lazy. They want to do the least amount of work and they'll just to stay alive, right? And so if you look at any companies, the C players, they stick to the B players. They kiss ass so they can do the bare minimum and stick around, because B players are performative. So they love praise, right? Praise is more important than anything else. And so C players give them the praise. And whenever you see a company that's a sinking ship, you'll see a bunch of B players who are so performative. And I'm on a couple of boards and I can see this. And they're surrounded by C players who they hire because they want people who praise them, not challenge them. And the A players have left, right? And so that's how I I look at it. And yes, it is somewhat, I mean, it's common when you're just starting out to feel that way. What do people think of me? But eventually you got to shrug yourself and be like, listen, I got to do the best I can. And I'm performing for me, not for anyone else. Right. And if that stimulates you, and that's why when I interview people for jobs or people I want to work with, one of the things I like is like, what are you doing in your 5 to 9? Like, you know, what are the things that you do outside of work that takes a lot of consistency and commitment and discipline to do it over a long period of time? Because a lot of people just do the 9 to 5 and come back, right? And if you have no hobbies that drive you, whatever it is, I don't care what it is, that drive you in the 5 to 9, then chances are it's hard to find, right? There should be something that drives you when it's not a stick or a carrot, right? There's some internal clock that's driving you.
So let me ask you, this is, I think about this more and more because like I feel generative and I just constantly do new stuff. And I tell people about it, and some people look at me like, well, why do you keep telling people about it? And sometimes I think I'm making them feel bad because they're not doing the same thing. You know, they say is like, youth is wasted on the young. As you get older, you start to not care.
Yeah.
Right? You don't really care about what people think about you and stuff. But I know as I work on these projects I call boil the ocean projects, where any individual is not going to have the wherewithal. You take the richest person on planet in Musk, put them together with all the folks that go on planes to go other countries and stuff. You put them all together, they still are not going to be rich enough to get us out of our healthcare crisis, for example. So that's a boil the ocean project. How do we get everyone to kind of feel the way you and I feel? We can focus on top performers, and that's maybe an easier problem. But how do you get all the other folks that are in the bell-shaped curve and down on the other end of the curve that are not feeling that same juice? And I liken this to, it's a dopamine thing for me. I mean, I'm highly addicted to just feeling good. So I like to do stuff that makes me feel good, to the extent that you sit me down with a thing. It used to be sit me down with like a pint of Haagen-Dazs. I would eat the whole pint. I just can't stop a good rich chocolate dessert. And I knew this about me over time. And I don't have the ability to diet. I mean, I just don't know how to do it. But with the closures, COVID closures, we started to move towards eating home a lot, right? I used to eat out a lot, but eat at home. And I went from this big plate of a lot of carbs and stuff with fewer vegetables to almost all veggies and all fiber and all this stuff. And then just protein and this tiny little carbs. And what it did is it forced my microbiome change, where those little gut bugs in us were just controlling our brains. And it reduced my desire to have like the sugars and the things like the Haagen-Dazs. And so it ultimately, I knew I didn't have the willpower, but if I could transform what was within me that would force me to have that desire for the sugars, I didn't necessarily do this deliberately. I just looked back and said, oh, wow, that's what happened. And I don't have, I used to put piles of sugar in my coffee with cream. I like it black now. I like the taste of the bitterness, right? And I think it's just because I transformed my microbiome. And that's why, again, the community thing. I mentioned this when we had a discussion. I like to hug up. I only like to hug people who are like Olympians because I want their microbiome. And so the more people you hang around with, there's studies on this. People who are thin tend to be around other thin folks. People who are less thin tend to be around less thin folks. You are the integration of the people around you, not just from what you talk about, but also what you share from the microbiome perspective.
You are not the average of the people you surround yourself with. You are a victim of their bad habits. So you either upgrade your circle, your environment, or you'll downgrade your potential. I say this a lot, but if you look at it, what you did there is you change your environment. I get a lot of flack for this because, it's funny because back in the day, I would tell my wife would bring all kinds of like stuff at home, snacks, like, ultra processed snacks, some junk, right? Many years ago, I think like this was 6 years ago before we went on this path. And I tell her all the time, why do you bring this? Because I eat it. And she'd be like, listen, Lloyd, you need to have some self-control. And one day I snap and like, listen, if you want to test my self-control, if you really want to test my self-control, why don't you bring home some strippers? And we both burst out laughing because she's a physician. She knows the neuroscience. She's a professor. And your mind doesn't 24/7 operate on self-control, right? And most high performers, they don't run their life on self-control. They optimize their environment for success. They design their environment for success because they know that willpower and self-control and all of those things should be reserved for the highest leverage decisions. And so, yes, you can go and hang out in a place full of temptation, but winning is not about winning. Nobody gives you a prize for dealing with temptation en route to winning. They give you the prize is for winning. So you got to design your environment for success. And I think what you did there was specifically design this environment, which is people and products and everything in that surrounding, right? And so if you make friends with 4 people who eat really clean, you're going to eat really clean. If your house does not have junk food there, if the Haagen-Dazs ice cream doesn't exist in the fridge, what are you going to do at midnight? Drive? Nothing's probably open, right? And so you're going to reach through the fridge and find like, what I do is I love eating frozen blueberries and my freezer only has frozen blueberries. So when I'm craving something, I reach and eat a bunch of frozen blueberries. They taste like candy, and that solves the problem.
Yeah, so you're being very deliberate, and I think that's what we just all have to
because
do.
I have no self-control. Like I'm an extreme human being. I operate on extremes and I have no self-control. And so I can go through meditation and therapy and try to fix my self-control, which may or may not work. I also have ADHD. I'm like on the spectrum here. So I can do all of these things that will potentially fix that and try to make some folks very rich, or I can just design my environment that puts me in good habits. And then you do 3-4 months of that, those habits become automatic.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. So one of the reasons I put together that food health app, which you mentioned.
Tell us about what the food health app is. Tell us what that is and how can one use it?
So the story behind it is that my wife was dealing with a little SIBO. This is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth thing. And she was blowing in this food marble device, which would measure methane and hydrogen to see with a FODMAP diet what food she should factor out. And it was logging the food was a pain in the ass. So I said, well, look, I'll just write an app and we'll take a picture of it. That's all you need to do. And she goes, oh, cool. And so I built this app. We're in the house. She'd take a picture. I was collecting the pictures and then she'd blow on the device and took a screenshot and we had the device score. Well, neural network guy here built a model that was so predictive that it literally could take a picture of the food and it would be as good as the damn food marble device. So it really helped her kind of figure out what foods or things she should stay away from. But in the process, she's having to travel. So I made a version that could be taken outward. And that's why I made a little app in the App Store. And I put it out there. And then I later learned these kids from high school build this Cal AI app and exited with my fitness for like $100 million. And I'm like, I just did that like in an afternoon. I don't care. I built it for myself and for her. But so I figured out how to make it available. And because it uses AI, I wasn't going to pay for the world to use it. So I made a mini subscription now, at least, where people at least have to pay to use it. But I'm not making money. I don't care. I just want not to have to pay for everyone to capture their food. But we put in this feature, which is interesting. People can take a picture and click a button to showcase it. And it goes up into our servers and goes actually to Facebook and Instagram and even TikTok. I can't believe I dealt with that API BS stuff, but went through it and it put a little music at it. And what I found is more people were starting to use it because it's like they like to show off their foods. It's sort of a community of people they don't know about. And we just had my sister-in-law was saying like, well, you should put a food shaming, button on that. Like, I can't, she posted eggs Benedict with locks on it. I'm like, well, that salmon does not overcome the eggs Benedict. What are you thinking? But the whole purpose again is just so people can become aware. So like, just like I was becoming aware that, I can't control my own Haagen-Dazs desire, but maybe there are foods ultimately that can guide people in the right direction. So it integrates with Apple Health. So, I mean, I saw right away, if I increase my fat consumption, maybe everyone's different, but it improved my sleep. And I'm like, whoa, I would never have thought of that. Right. And it's just like, if everyone says they've got the secret sauce that works, well, it might just work for them. Everyone's going to be different. And so just helping people log and just capturing the data in a way, and if it involves community, that's great, but it involves a way to capture the data where if they can't figure it out themselves, we can later put in some tools to help them figure it out. But, just like the FODMAP thing, it might be a point in time where someone could take a picture of, well, I already have the functionality, but a menu or a picture of foods, and they'll come back and say, well, that might hurt your sleep tonight. And they might say, well, maybe I shouldn't eat that. Right. And then I went to one next level as we put a CGM interface into a TXD version for type 1 and type 2 diabetics, or those people who are trying to follow their blood sugar. And that's a much simpler. It's just like, here's a picture or here's a menu and, capture your blood sugar. And for the diabetics I've spoken with, they like to minimize the amount of carbs they intake for obvious reasons. So one of the challenges they face is taking a picture of a menu and saying, of all these food items, what has the least carbs? And so that it just does that for you. So, those are apps I put together largely just for us. And I just figured, let's make others benefit from this. And maybe just like a lot of my projects, I might be 30 years in advance of things, but I don't mind planting the seeds for trees I'll never sit underneath. But one day, I think the rest of the world will come to this concept of that everyone talks about in our space, the food is medicine, but they literally start to medicate themselves appropriately with the foods they eat.
I think the environment is the biggest driver of this, right? And starts with your pantry and your family. It's hard to optimize alone also. Forget optimize. I keep using the word optimize. It's not about optimize. Optimize is like when you already have the fundamentals right. But like if your family is following the fundamentals, then it's really easy. But if you have all this stuff around your house and your kids are eating one thing, your kids are on the nuggets and fries program, and your wife's eating something else and you're eating something, it's going to be very, very hard over long term to make this a lifestyle. So the key word is not optimize, but make a healthy lifestyle change, right? And what does that look like? Relevant to you. Not everyone needs to be a jacked bodybuilder or a marathon runner, but like what are the elements that you can integrate in your life so it's a way of living? Walking after meals, eating whole foods, less exposure to endocrine disruptors, limit ultra processed garbage, right? Like all of that stuff. If you make that a habit and the whole family follows it, then it becomes how you live. And eventually what happens is that's the kind of people you attract.
I agree.
That's what I've found. Now, I want to get into like creativity, music, drumming. We talked a lot in the past about how rhythm connects to biology, focus, emotional regulation. Does drumming and playing music give you something that normal exercise does not?
It's a huge question. So I have seen direct correlations between those days I drum and how effective or efficient or how well rested I am the next day. So it directly impacts my sleep. And it's not just the dexterity that's involved, because drumming involves multiple body parts often doing different things. If I'm drumming on my own in my home electronic drum set, that certainly helps. And that's just sort of the dexterity thing. And there's physical motion. Unfortunately, I wear my Oura ring sometimes, so it thinks I've done a lot of exercise. Why I haven't really exercised much? Because your hand's moving. But when I do the drumming with people in my studio, there's the full body exposure of, and I've got a ton of subs, and next time you're down in town, I'm going to have to bring you in. Because I mean, just having the music play there, you're inundated. It's sound engineered studio. But I've a lot of low frequencies, mediums, highs, all that stuff affecting the microbiome that I said. But then the most important, because I've just done that by myself there, the most important is having other parties there. And we do these mixes where we have these really generally wide-ranging musicians that we come in without an agenda, and we don't have a plan. And a lot of times we just have someone who says, I'd like to try this song I heard on the radio stereo, on the radio coming in, and no one's played it before. And in fact, almost every time we have cases where no one's played it together. And I do a little Spotify sampling, and there's enough good musicians that they can just pick it up from there, and then we just go. And it forces you to really just pay attention and not look down at your own stuff. Literally like collaborate. And we do that for a couple hours. When I do that, I mean, and I only am typically buzzing. We'll often have a conversation afterwards, intellectual speak, but great sleep that night. I mean, there are times where I'll knock out 2.5 hours of REM sleep, or over 2 hours of deep sleep, which for the people who track it, that's a lot, right? And right after mix session, and it's typically when there are people involved, full body exposure to sound, and then the mini hermetic challenge of not playing songs before, because it can be stressful. I mean, sometimes these guys throw out songs for me that are like, whoa. I first of all say, look, I am not playing Rush, and I'm not playing Zeppelin. I cannot live up to those drummers, right? But there are other times like Toto. I mean, there's some crazy tough songs there that people want to play, and I'm just like, oh, you know. But that little stress that doesn't kill you helps. But when you do it with a group of people, with the sound, it's like a secret sauce combination. So,
do you think it mimics like exercise or some like physical activity, or it's a different pathway?
Well, I think it does, because the reason our brains are as sophisticated as they are is because we have the dexterity, the motion, movement. You know, we're the only species on the planet that can play the piano. I mean, come on, you don't see monkeys playing the piano, and they're, arguably as dolphins, certainly not, right? I mean, the opposable thumb is one thing, but it's motion. And that, frankly, it causes such cerebral challenge. That's why when we look at AI, the world of AI, I don't mind all the software-based AI. We're going to leverage the crap out of that, but it's going to take a while before the robots really start taking over the trades. It's going to take a long time. That's a big challenge. That's why our brains are sophisticated there. So when we do a lot of fairly intricate motion, I think it's enough mini challenge, but also helps you in a way that it forces a level of recovery. And that's what it's all about, going from stress to recovery. And so you look like HRV, that's just like a measure of quick recovery marks, right? And so I think, drumming gives you that level of multiple challenge. And then when you stop playing or breaks, there's a little bit of recovery. So it's like a little interval trading thing. And physically, yeah, I mean, some people crash and bust, and I get sore sometimes, but I think it's more of the mental thing and the control of the fine-tuned muscles.
That's amazing. I think, it's fascinating. I guess, people use different terms, but when you combine AI and prevention, sort of what it is precision medicine, which is predictive, right? It's preventative, and you also need it to be participatory, right? Like you want people to participate. Like, so how do you use technology to drive people to participate in their own health? And it's personalized. And so I think that is the important part, is like, how do you if you combine AI and root cause analysis, what you get is you can prevent disease before it happens by predicting the root cause, by helping people participate in their own health, right? And so I think that is important. Like, it's personalized, because a lot of what we talk about, right, like in medicine, it's all evidence-based. Look at evidence. I'm like, yes, but if you go down that rabbit hole of evidence-based medicine, and every physician wants to be evidence-based, you realize all the meta-analysis and randomized control trials are all majority white male population, right? Most of the studies, because that's what drives the funding, is like white male population. So yes, you can be evidence-based, but it's not. Yes, most cases, yes, it's relevant, but it doesn't account for the individual's ethnicity, genetics, biology. And so you're evidence-based. You can be truly evidence-based only if you take the evidence and make it relevant to the individual, one, accounting for their biology and how they feel. And people miss that, right? A lot of people miss that.
Yeah. So again, I think how nature works. Genetic algorithm has been the most powerful algorithm that I've leveraged over my computational career. And it uses the concept of fitness to guide the directionality, right? And there's some shuffling and mutation and population dynamics and all this stuff. But if you don't have that measurement of fitness that is a feedback loop, and it needs to be somewhat close in space to cause an effect. If it's really far away, it doesn't work as well. I heard this great phrase the other day, like those who are always doing stuff for the purpose of like entrepreneurship or business, if they're short-term greedy, yeah, they might build a nice business. But if they're long-term greedy, they basically will build generational wealth. And what that often means is working towards things that they might not immediately benefit from. So this whole pay it forward stuff, you're not even seeing the effect from your cause. It's really, really far, and it takes a whole nother higher level thinking to get there. But
there's again, a phrase, one of my coaches is Andy Johns, and Andy was the head of growth at Facebook in the early days, Zuck time. And then he was the head of growth at Twitter, and he became the president of Wealthfront before becoming a VC. He became the president of Wealthfront, became a venture capitalist, and then had an incident that led him down the path of spirituality. And now he runs the Integrated Mental Health Institute, and super bright person. And he introduced me this concept of first mountain and second mountain. And he said the first mountain is all about the chase. You're chasing something, the next money, the next car, the next, the next zero, the next promotion. Everything is a chase. And eventually you get to a point where the next X dollar or the next X chase doesn't drive you anymore. And you start moving towards the second mountain. And on the second mountain, your goals and your skills and what you do are all working in sync towards a greater purpose. And you shift from happiness, which is temporary state, to joy, which is flow state. Now, in between the first mountain and the second mountain, you're in this valley, and it's important to experiment. And that's where a lot of people that exit, they go and try to do a company right away. They're heading towards the second mountain, but they're still operating with the first mountain traits. So he always tried to like bring me back to the thinking of second mountain. And that is informed by this phrase I use a lot, is if you chase power, you will destroy relationships. If you chase money, you will make short-term decisions like the Wall Street. The only way to build something generational lasting is to chase impact. And I've seen this across hundreds of people I've interviewed.
That's good. Now that's definitely spot on. I just guess I've reached a point in my life, and maybe it's because I'll be 60 this year. I don't know. It's maybe because you saw some of my story, a brief tech that evolved. I lost my mom, and then later my sister and my dad recently, and so that's one of the reasons I built AI Dad, and which led to AI Steve and all this stuff. But those were impactful enough that I like to think about mistakes that all those have made. I know that I've made my own mistakes, but I'm almost everything I do lately now is not really so much for myself. It's for other people on the outside. But on the inside, I actually feel good about doing it, right? So there's like this ego. I get the dopamine rush out of like building an app and putting out the app store that say, hey, there might be someone that benefits that I'll never meet. I'm not making money. I don't care. I feel good about that. And so, I almost argue to the point that even the top philanthropists on the planet over history, they get a little rush out of it. They feel good about giving it to others. And, that's what causes this impact that you're referring to. But it's all, again, biologically driven, where we're just like, I think we feel good about it. Because let's face it, if it was like getting a root canal, you're not going to do it, right? Unless you totally get off on that pain kind of thing. But realistically, I think a lot of times people pay it forward because they feel good about doing that. And I know that's how I have been lately. And so almost 100% of what I do lately is, aside from the occasional cold plunge and getting to work out a little bit, right, the immediate and other people might not benefit because I'm away from, that network. Most everything I do nowadays for others.
What's funny is there's some science behind it, right? I think I'm going to look this up once while we're doing it live. So I think the gene expression is called, there is a gene in your body. It's called CTRA gene expression, right? And it's like the joy of giving others does more for you. Like, so self-care, like, yoga, meditation, working out, whatever is good. But when you help somebody else, if you help other people achieve without expecting anything in return, the universe comes back to you in ways you can't imagine. And it is actually, my wife did a reel on this, on the CTRA gene expression, and it's activated by other giving. And so scientists looked at people and they did a study, and they noticed like chronic depression and these mental health ailments, and people who were giving towards others, they made people go through this other people giving, like helping others. They had sort of benefited from that. Their depression signals or signs or symptoms were significantly improved with this other people give. So there's something there. The joy of giving is second to none.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there's so much biology in this. Lately I've come to doing some mini agricultural type stuff. I grow my own broccoli seeds and stuff like that, and I've been planting some other seeds. And occasionally I'll put a bunch of seeds together, and I'll see like only one sprout. And I always think, and I'm sure there's biochemistry in this, are the other seeds signaling to the one that's growing, look, it's your turn. I'm not going to consume resources. I won't germinate. I'll let you do it. But that ultimately they might become food for bacteria. And it just and I think comes back, everything, I always say, the macroscopic mimetics of the microscope, right? If you study mitochondria, these are incredibly important entities within every one of our cells, right? They help program cell death, right? They're not just the batteries and energized. They'll take out a cell and say, you're sick. Let's just, to the extent that they'll actually be suicidal and take out the cell so the rest of the organism survives. I think it's just hardwired into the biology. Mitochondria, by the way, have its own DNA. So I think even to the point of like how genes are expressed, there's so much we don't know, right? The nature versus nurture thing. But I have a feeling there's this long feedback mechanism that's integrated in that black box. And fundamentally, that's why I use the neural network capabilities that I have. Because I think the world of science is just like, it's useful. We can map our own mindset and anthropomorphize things. But at the end of the day, nature is a black box. It tries something, and if it survives, it goes in that direction. And nature doesn't understand why. It just keeps doing it in order for survival. And honestly, I think there's just things hardwired that we just beyond our capability of understanding. So that's one of the reasons I just try to collect a ton of data and leverage these systems, these neural network systems, to try to predict, so that we can do the right thing in the right time, in the right place.
So this is interesting. I wanted to talk about it. So it's called the CTRA gene, right? I'm reading it. It's conserved transcriptional response to adversity. It's a gene that is distinct and genome-wide blueprint of gene activity. It's triggered in human white blood cells during periods of chronic stress, loneliness, and trauma, right? Cool. And so they ran a study, a randomized control trial that compared the biological effects of doing good for others versus doing good for yourself. And so participants were split into two groups. One group performed pro-social acts, so acts of kindness for others, giving. Another group performed self-kindness acts. And a third was just a control group. Only the group assigned to giving and helping others showed a significant reduction in the CTRA gene expression. Isn't that crazy?
That's huge.
And so the thing is, the participants who only followed the self-kindness protocol, treating themselves, saw no change in their CTRA stress profile in depressive symptoms, chronic stress symptoms. So this is insane, right? What does this tell you? You're built for community.
Yes, absolutely. And built for the feedback that you might not directly perceive, right? But you pay it forward nonstop. But those solo performers who only care about themselves and are greedy, and like karma comes back to haunt them. CTRA genes must be firing left and right.
Yeah. So this was very fascinating when my wife told me about it. She did a whole reel on it. But now in rapid fire, we're getting close to the end here. One health habit you will never give up.
Optimizing sleep.
Awesome. How many hours a night do you sleep?
Actual sleep between 7.5, 8.5.
Very good. Very good. Most underrated biomarker.
So I would say platelets.
Why?
It illustrates inflammatory stress responses that your body, I think it's a much longer running metric than like an H1AC with blood sugar.
Interesting. Most overrated biohack.
I think and unfortunately I failed at this, over indulging on individual supplements.
Why?
Food is medicine. You want the matrix that nature came up with. You don't want to concentrate the crap out of everyone. Although magnesium might be one because we're depleted. But
I think a bunch of stuff, a lot of people just take supplements because somebody said it online. And I think it's important to just test your biomarkers and see what you're off and what you're deficient in, and just take those versus everything under the sun. Yeah. So that's on point. Cold plunge or sauna? I know your answer, but
yes, I think they're needed. You need both.
But if you could pick one, if you just had one, you would probably do cold plunge.
Yeah, I would do cold plunge because it's the anti-inflammatory responses.
Every time we've had a call, you're coming off of a cold plunge. So
yeah. Dude, mean, like I said, I attribute my platelet reductions, body fat reductions. I'm just getting rid of the pain. And honestly, one of the reasons for those of us who work out a lot, I mean, shoulder injury is killing me. That affects sleep, right? So if your shoulder pain sucks, and if you wake up because of pain, that's no bueno. So you want to reduce inflammation in a natural way, and cold plunge is the way to go.
Interesting. Now, best sleep upgrade.
Ooh. Recently, it has been making sure that I don't look at my phone upon awakening. I used to do that, read emails or spam emails in bed. I make sure I get movement, of course, like natural light, but just do much of my morning routine before I even look at the phone, which is important because I have to turn off my 8 sleep. I have to check the Oura ring, but it's so you kind of hold back. So not checking the phone in the morning, and ideally not looking at it before we go to bed. But like I said, I like to see what my heart rate is before I go down.
That is interesting. Now, best food rule.
Earlier the better. Not eating too late. Tough one. And of course, walking after eating, but not eat and keep caloric numbers down if possible, or just overall massive intake down, because you can eat as healthy as crap, but if you're eating overindulging, it's just not good.
I think not eating, leaving a lot of time before bed and when your last meal is like 3+ hours, I think that's a good one. What we talked about earlier got me thinking is the whole heart rate before bed. What's your heart rate before bed? And you got to monitor. And we don't monitor that. I'm right. We don't monitor. There's no signal that specifically tells you what your heart rate before bed is. So if sleep is one of the key metrics of health, what's the thing that stops you from sleeping? What is the leading indicator? And if that's a heart rate before bed, I think that's the one to watch. And if sleep if eating contributes to it, if having an argument contributes to it, then you got to watch it. So I like that one.
Doom scrolling does it. And by the way, you know how I came up with this? My AI Steve spotted that in my metrics. It identified my heart rate prior to the time I'd go to sleep, and it indicated, hey, your heart rate is elevated on those nights that you didn't sleep as well. And that's related to temperature too. That's why you want to be cooler at night. I don't know if you know, the sensor's a little disrupted when you go in a cold plunge, but my heart rate always comes down when I get cold. I get in the low 40s, and when you get older, it comes down anyway. But I get in the 40s. Oh, and by the way, the speed with which you recover is also key. So if you can, as you know, right, and that's all about interval training. It's training to recover quickly. But if you can get if your resting heart rate is in the low 70s or mid 60s or something, and then you just do the breaths. I do the 4-7-8 or 14-16 or whatever combination is that. I do that. I can just pull 10 points down typically on my heart rate really quickly. The breath work, I imagine you do it, but
No, I don't do breath work enough. I do I'm a sauna person. I try to get some breath work in when I do the sauna. Yeah. Best food rule.
Best food rule? Didn't we eat less and not too late? Didn't we do that one?
Yeah, we did that. Okay, we did that. I thought that was part of your sleep upgrade. One supplement you actually believe in.
I keep coming to sleep, and that's a supplement, but I would say ingested exogenous. Why? It's between vitamin D and magnesium, but magnesium I think is important. Honestly, lately I've been hitting reishi mushroom powders. Dude, it's tough for me to give up one. You make me pick one.
Magnesium glycinate, maybe, if that's helping you. Again, I don't know. I just picked it because I started it and it's helped me immensely. One thing founders should stop doing immediately.
It comes to sleep again. They should not be cutting into sleep. It's the best drug on the planet. A lot of people just cut that short. So I think that's probably key. But the next one would be think beyond the shareholder value, go next level, because unfortunately that's what people think about. Begin with the end in mind stuff, or how they're going to make their own wealth, but should look beyond that.
Very cool. Now, I think most founders, if they don't do anything and just focus on better sleep, I think their life will be in a better place, right? For the long haul. I think we treat business like like we're sprinting, but it's a marathon, and then you're sprinting a marathon, and that's like the hardest thing. And so how do you be in this flow state? And yes, everything goes into it, like spirituality and community and exercise and nutrition and mindset and recovery. But one of the biggest levers you can pull is like sleep, I think, right? If you don't sleep well for a long period of time, you wake up crappy, you look at your phone, your circadian is already off, something happens, you lose it, right? It's a big part of like emotional regulation. Two things, right? Nutrition and sleep play a big part of it. They ran like a voodoo doll test study. I don't know if you've seen that on couples though. And they made couples poke holes or pins into a voodoo doll for their partner. And what they found, and then after they made couples blow horns pins into their partners' faces. And what they found was very interesting. The partners who put the most pins or blew the horns the loudest were kind of hangry. They were low on blood sugar, right? And so that ties to it. Anything that puts you off, right, puts you in that state is it's sleep or like not eating, right? And so that is something to think about, is like, what are you putting in your body or not, like under eating, not sleeping, that is putting you in a state of anger or lack of emotional regulation, that you then go and take it out on somebody else. And you're most likely, I mean, you're the company's most valuable asset. If you are dysregulated, then you're going to wreck something at work.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Now, one song or drummer that gets you fired up.
Fired up? Yeah, you mean in positive way or negative way?
Positive way. Positive way.
You know, like I'm like a goldfish memory with songs. I like the patterns and often the titles. I don't know words. I often just don't even know a lot of the times. I like the whole Tom Petty genre, but so I don't. There's not any particular song. I will play just about anything that I'm capable of getting close to, even country.
Yeah.
You know, no, I mean, there's this way I think I don't have any particular bias. Sorry.
Awesome. So you don't have like a walkout song? Like I used to play Eye of the Tiger every morning when I wake up.
Oh, really?
Because what I'd do is I'd wake up and I'd try to bang out like 50 push-ups. That was how I got into like really training, getting the habit of health. So when I first started, I'm like, you know what? How do I like put myself into this rhythm? So I'd wake up, play Eye of the Tiger in sunlight, bang out 50 push-ups, and then my kids and everyone would join. And that, I don't do that as much anymore, not frequently anyway, but I had this cadence going for a year of like max push-ups. And eventually I got to a point where I could do more than 50 in a row. But when I started, I'd just do like sets of that. So I think I'm like, what charges you up? And I play Eye of the Tiger a lot of the times when I need to get pumped up. So
what I will do, that's flow, in drumming and music generally, but drumming, there's the concept of rudiments. And so I'll go through like singles, doubles, paradiddles, triplets, you know, and I'll go through a sequence, and I'll often do a click in my ear, which I never do when we play with groups. But if I'm locked in, I get to this flow state and it's just really moving and flexible. And if it's like the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off. Because then when I'm playing a song, if I feel like, oh, there's a break here, my muscle memory, my brain just pushes me into a flow, and it's because the rudiments. And so that's similar to what your Kickstarter program was in the morning.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's exactly it. What's the best $100 you've spent on your health?
100? We're at inflationary times. It's usually an extra zero or two.
But like that's why I said like go. Let's sink down.
Tell me what yours is.
Honestly, what's the best $100 I've spent is? Let me think about it.
Not easy, is it?
It's not easy on my health. What I got to think about it, because the Aura Ring is more expensive. The Whoop is more expensive. I have both. Although the Google just launched their $99 Fitbit with no subscription. Isn't that crazy?
Well, you know what they say, if it's free, you're the,
Yeah, if it's free, then you're the product. But I think Google and everyone is just after the longitudinal data, right? Because once you have that, because they have the imagery. What's interesting is if Meta put out, because we already talked about like what imaging does, right? And so you have everyone's images, and you have what everyone is consuming and doing online through your Meta platforms, whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Instagram. And now you add another layer where you give people a health device. You can even give it for free. You can give it for $10. But if you have that data, now you have the largest longitudinal data ever, and you can run like studies at will. You can build the largest healthcare company. Meta could if they wanted to, but they're not honestly, in that game.
And so I know it's a side, but I don't know if you cut it or not. But so I've said, like Facebook, Zuckerberg should get his house in order and just tell the investors to get bent. He's got enough money forever. He should just take the content and transform it to the AI world, and we can help position a medical direction or health wellness direction, because people post a ton of content. They give them a huge amount of information about pictures, where they're at, their sentiment, all that stuff. Hugely valuable content. You don't have to sell ads around. You can just give people, or even later subscribe if you want to make money on it. But I think just help people out. As I said, I have a story where a friend was posting Krispy Kremes and McDonald's and all this for years, and then there's a picture of the guy in the stroke ward. And so you could pretty much anticipate the metabolic crisis that occurred, and the trajectory was defined. online. People provide all that content up to Facebook, and
100%,
massive
100%.
repository. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think I can answer. I don't think I spend so much money on health and wellness. It's the fabric of like all my spend largely. So I don't think there's anything that falls down to the $100 level. Sorry.
Nothing for the $100. So this is at least good. It forces you to think. I think for me, it was the lifting belt. Right, I
Oh,
was like trying to lift heavy, and I'm trying to see what did I buy in the last little while, and like it was just causing discomfort. Like I said, I don't do deadlifts, but like for a squat or a heavy barbell row, it was just causing me some discomfort. So I bought this belt, and it wasn't $100. It was like $40, but I use it all the time. I use it every single day.
you gave me a thought. I think I now know. So I told you about the shoulder reliever I do,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and so that it always is like a little centrifugal force thing with a little weighted ball, and you spin directionality, and it's clear the days I do that, my shoulder is so much less painful, and I can get a better night's sleep. So, and I think that was under $100.
Yeah. That's what we're looking for. Like, what's the thing that's like made some improvement that's caused some high leverage downstream benefit? And if like that shoulder roller thing improve your sleep, that is like plus, right? That's the thing. If I can lift heavy because of this, like, for me, it was like the belt and wrist straps, and I use them, and I never did for the longest time because I'm like, oh, why do I need the support? And you realize you do, right?
Yeah.
As you age, you completely do. And the last one, what does high performance at 80 look like for you?
Well, like a TA would say, it's a marathon, right? To get there, just being able to do things at that age, whether it's walking and carrying your luggage, putting overhead or whatever it is, you want to be able to do that. And I think at the end, when you start to get that age, I think having the community and friends. I think longevity experts tend to forget about this because in order to live to be centurion and longer, you need to build up a big wealth base. But even if you have all this money in the world, if you don't have friends, dying alone sucks, right? So you definitely want to have that. Build the community, expand the community, and just continue on and keep planting those seeds for those trees you're never going to be underneath.
Definitely. Ending on that note, if you build a community, you won't become a commodity. Everything else is downstream from that. All the optimization, all the health metrics, all of that. Nothing matters if you can't enjoy in your day to day because you have some people who care for you, check on you, call on you, right? Like what else nothing else matters. And I think, and that's the thing, you are not the average of the people you surround yourself with. You're a victim of their bad habits. So who you hang out with can either make you feel like a rock star when you have nothing, or it can make you feel like a bum when you have everything. And it's a funny story that I tell a lot. We were refugees of the Gulf War in the 90s, and we were on this rickety bus going from Kuwait to Baghdad to Jordan on the highway of death. Every buses were bombed. I think there was a bombing just before we got on that highway. And so you could see bodies and everything. And the adults in the bus, of course, currency is invalid. You don't know if you're going to live or die. You don't know where you're going to land. We were heading to this refugee camp in the middle of nowhere. And on this multi-day journey, all I could see around the bus were the adults were singing, laughing, and playing the guitar. That's it. They were singing, laughing, playing the guitar. It was like a camping trip. And I was a kid, maybe I was 9 or whatever. That's all I could remember. That's my memory of the Gulf War. So whenever I talk about the Gulf War, everyone's like, oh, that was crazy hardship you may have gone through. And I keep my recollection, and it was a camping trip. It was a vacation. That's all I can think of. And so, I formulated that thesis and that's in that trip has informed the rest of my life. It's neither the destination nor the journey, but the companions that matter the most. You could be on a shitty journey on the way to hell, but great companions make it memorable. And for me, that's so important because anytime I think of hardship or anything as a kid, reflecting back, or when people ask me, I'm like, I had none. My parents weren't wealthy, but they came from a life of abundance and community, and they never made me feel like we had less. And so that's really important. You can have pain and suffering is part of life. It's how you deal with it. And if you're around people who deal with it with joy, right, and take it in the chest, right, it's like these bulls. I think there's this kind of bull that when the storm comes, they don't run away from it; they run toward it, so they pass the storm quicker.
Right? That's clever.
So that's it. And I love that we ended on that note of community.
Yeah, cool.